All right, so I'd like to welcome Yves Côté. He's here with us to do an interview. So grateful. He's also going to talk about his new book, Metamorphosis, The Road to Change. So instead of me providing an introduction, I think it's better to hear from Yves. So Yves, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Of course, thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Yves Côté. I'm a French Canadian from Quebec. First thing I like to say is you're looking at a man that they never had to let out of prison. Okay, because I'm serving 2 life sentence. We could probably go into that a little later. Is a life sentence is a life sentence, which means that I'm on parole for the rest of my life. My story basically goes from explaining how do we go from an innocent 5-year-old boy to being locked up 23 hours and a half in super maximum, and how do you go from there to be sitting here at home and I go out, I speak to universities, I speak to different events, different groups, community groups. So basically, obviously there had to be a lot of changes in my life. Between the age of 20 and 53, I spent almost 32 years in prison. Okay, I spent time all across Canada. I've been in 18 different institutions across Canada. I also been in every security level there is, okay, from a minimum security to the SHU. The SHU is a special handling unit, which is our super maximum in Canada, where basically segregation is a way of life, okay? I think the longest you could be out of your cell in the super maximum is eventually you're allowed to be out. I think it's about 4 hours a day. So basically you're locked up all the time, and that's a way of life there. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm serving 2 life sentence. Between the age of 20 and 33, I got sentenced to 63 years in prison. 40 of those are life sentence because I'm serving 1 life 25 and 1 life 15. I've been out of prison now since December 13, 2013, or December 6th, I think.
Yeah, it was the exact time too, like 12:01 p.m. or something.
Yeah, in 2013. So I've been out for a while now, but it's also been, it's quite a culture shock coming out of prison after all these years. I'm still adapting as a today, and I'm still struggling because it's not as easy as just saying, well, okay, you're out of prison now, you forget this. But when you spend almost more than half of your life in prison and in institution, because between the age of 11 and 17, I was in and out of juvenile centers, and also a couple of psychiatry hospital. So I've been institutionalized at a very young age. It's quite interesting because I know this is probably be a question later, is I felt safe when I was in institution. So I've been out, I work regularly. I got a full-time job. I work in a plastic factory here in Aldergrove. I'm married. I have a beautiful, wonderful wife who family has accepted me, has adopted me, and which is very, very awesome. I got a couple of grandkids through this, and I just adore them. When you're in prison this long, for such a long time, everybody you knew before you went to prison has moved on, including my family, my biological family.
I did want to actually ask you about that, on like how social ties and social connection are so essential to being a human even, right? And we come to understand ourselves through encounters with others. So I come to know who I am by spending time with my family and friends. But when you're in prison, especially in solitary, I've just read about cases where you completely lose any sense of self because you're so sort of unable to even, you're not even interacting with the guards barely. And so how did you find that? Was it something that
it's quite interesting because, as I was just saying, is when you're in prison for that long, Okay, some people do have contacts with their family and all that. The family keeps on contact and all that. Some of them were married before they went to prison. What happens is that I was in prison for so long that in that lap of time, I got married and divorced.
Oh, wow.
And that lap of time, there's a certain time that I was married and I also got divorced. And this is, there's time before and there's time after. Okay. I had a relationship and it lasted about 6 years. Okay. But the thing is that because of my history, my family has moved on. Okay, both of my parents has passed away. My father passed away in 1988 while I was in prison. Okay, and because of the family history, I couldn't go to the funeral. And well, my mother passed away when I was 5 years old, and then I was placed in foster home. Okay, and in foster home, it didn't go very well. There was a lot of abuse, physical, emotional, and some of them were sexually abused. Okay, so you know, as I mentioned earlier, the first time that I stepped into an institution, I was 11 years old, and the problem that happened then is that I didn't really feel bad about going in an institution. I actually felt safe because it was the first time that I was actually being taken care of. I'm not a person who got abused sexually when I was in institution. I know that this stuff did happen, like history speaks for itself, but I'm not a person who got sexually abused when I was in institution. So what happened is I kept on going back for stupid things. Sometimes they were short sentence, but I remember having to do 6 months here, 6 months there, 3 months over there, a year here, you know, so all these things. And it was a lot of small sentence, but I always kept on going back because I felt safe there.
Did you feel like how you were sort of shaped as a person? Do you find that you were able to sort of develop within prison too, or was a lot of the development once you were released? Do they give you opportunities to learn and grow when you're in the system?
The interesting fact on this one is I remember when I first went into a federal prison. Okay, the first federal prison that I've done beside the reception center that I went to a maximum security in Montreal in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines called Archambault. This is a maximum. And, you know, when we talk about maximum securities, people will always say, oh, like when you talk about ourselves, they say, oh, this is a crazy maximum. You know, it's a very violent place. Well, I've been in 4 of the 5 maximum across Canada, and all maximum security is violent. Okay, all of them is the violence is omnipresent. I remember when I first stepped into Archambault, like I was just 20 years old. Okay, and back then, what they used to do after you got even, I got classified to go to a medium, but they still send you to as a transition into a maximum for 90 days. Okay, which was quite. I found it as an educational time. Okay, for when you first get in prison. And being in an institution when I was a kid, spent many months, sometimes years in an institution, I kind of felt that this was just the next progression for me to go. So I went to prison, and I remember looking around the yard, and I actually remember asking me this question. I asked myself, what scares me? Okay, I was 20 years old. I weighed 130 pounds. Okay, so I was a small person. And I looked around and I looked in the weight pit, towards the weight pit. They had a weight pit outside. And you had a lot of guys working out. Okay, big guys, lifting heavy weights. Okay, and there's some pretty big guys back then too, in there, you know. So I looked there, you know, those guys were scary, intimidating. Okay. And another group of people that scared me, you know, usually when I go to classes, I ask people, how many people in here has tattoo? And even in that class, young people, many hands go up, and they say, you know, and I look and I say, oh, I'm kind of happy of that, because one of the concerns that I had when I got out is I didn't want to stand out too much. I don't want to have prison tattooed on my forehead. But in prison, because back then the only people that had tattoos were sailors, bikers, criminals, okay, and army guys, you know. So, you know, it's not like today. I mean, ugh, today is unbelievable. So those guys, and the guys that really impressed or are scary was the guy that they were full of tattoos, okay, because you knew these guys had a history. Not like today, but you knew these guys had a history in prison. Now, there was another group of people that scared me, were lifers. Okay, guys serving life in prison, but not any life. The one that were serving life 25. Okay, because life 25 is first degree murder. Okay, which is premeditated murder. Okay, so these guys, they didn't kill out of emotion. They planned it, and you know, it was something that they were attempted to do, kill. Okay. So those guys serving life 25, an example, just to say, to a lot of guys, like you get a lot of guys serving life 10 and things like that for killing their spouse. Okay, I don't care about these guys. Okay, these guys, I mean, I'm not going to go on speaking about this. So the guys serving life 25, you know, for first degree murders, those guys were scared. And there was one more group of guys that scared me too, were the guys who killed while they were in prison. Because you knew if you F with those guys, well, there's a chance they might kill you. Mm. So those were the four things that I looked at when I asked myself, well, what scares me? And that was the answer. Well, about 15, 20 years later, basically I became what I feared. My violence in my life has always been, for a big percentage of it, instrumental violence, which means that there was always something to gain from it. Remember what I've said about a group of people that scared me were the people that killed people in prison. Mm-hmm. So the thing is what I did is I became what I feared in the hope that people would leave me alone. And it did. It was a great, you know, it worked, it got its purpose. After all the dust fell down and calmed down, there was a big problem. It never changed how I felt inside. Yeah. It didn't take the fear away.
It didn't at all. Yeah. And what do you think that tells you then? Like,
what a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
What a waste of time and a waste of victims